Chairperson, we cannot be passive observers, but active participants. The informal sector is not an alternative, it's a bedrock on which the edifice of a new South Africa can be built. A South Africa that is economically robust and socially equitable. The question is not whether we should invest in informal sector, but how swiftly and how efficiently we can do it. Let us, this parliament, be the crucible where we forge new policies for inclusive growth. Let's put aside our political differences and ensure that we collectively support the sector towards a prosperous and equitable, sustainable South Africa. Chairperson, our future is teeming with untapped potential and promise, and the informal sector can be a linchpin for our collective endeavors. As the African National Congress, we will lead this process and seize the moment, and guided by our shared vision and fortified by our collective and collaborative action. In closing, as we look forward to a promise of a new South Africa, let us remember that falling markets in these stalls that line our streets and in these hands of our local artisans lie an untapped potential to drive our nation forward. I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. Honorable Kwankwa. Thank
you, Chairperson, and thank you to all the contributors. Colleagues, I think we all agree that we need to work collectively to try and address not only the challenges that are faced by the informal sector, but to implement measures that are going to help us to transform the South African economy. Honorable Jacobs is quite right, Faiz Jacobs, that the informal sector in particular, and considering its size, it forms the bedrock of our economic activity and what we're trying to do. But I want to appeal to the minister, with whom I agreed with what she said today in some of the initiatives, but to also say that the resources that are provided to small businesses in particular aren't adequate in order for them to be able to meet the funding challenges or the funding requirements of that sector in particular. There should be funding that is channeled, a significant chunk of money that is channeled towards the sector to try and transform the South African economy, but to also address the issue that Honorable Manyi said, the issue of addressing market concentration. The sectors in our society, especially in the private sector, are very oligopolistic in nature. There is room, if some small businesses can be supported, for them to actually enter into those spaces if we come up with a regulatory framework that will help us to address those issues. Minister, I think the issue about how they should be formalized should actually need a complete review. Perhaps what they require is a digital profile rather than asking them to register via CPRO and then incur costs trying to file tax returns with SARS and all the other manner of problems that they incur because of the regulatory framework that we have. But also there's an opportunity now to use the post office in order for it to come up with products and services that are going to be responsive to that sector. But I don't know how we can achieve that when there was a decision not to make any financial injection into the post bank, because then it will not be able to serve that particular purpose. Because a typical example would be you need to develop insurance policies that speak to that sector in particular, because that would be the only bank that would then be in rural areas and small towns and so on and stuff like that. These are issues we need to address, but also the development plan of municipalities at local government level. How can you not? We know that there are mamas who sell vegetables at taxi ranks and whatnot, but we build taxi ranks all the time that do not take into account the informal sector and how to accommodate it. We build malls in townships that take away businesses from our people, but we don't take into account the informal sector and how we could help it formalize. We call it development when we bring big business that must take over money from the townships and send it to Stellenbosch and other communities. We don't call it development when we need to invest in our own people and make sure that they have spaces, they have trading spaces, they have rights to operate in these areas. Make it mandatory so that the informal sector and the small business sector is incorporated into the development of our economy. Thank you, Chair.
Honorable Member, thank you very much. Honorable members, that concludes the debate and the business of this visual mini-plenary session. The mini-plenary will now rise. Thank you very much.